just started recording now. So anything you say can and will be used against you. One more. You want to do a word of opening, Paul? You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, unmute. Welcome everyone to another one of our Zoom calls. We've got another one in a fortnight's time, which is a special one with Rueter, Nicaragua, where we're doing our own blended cigar on the call. And then in December, we've got one every Thursday night, two with Hannes and Franco with Cuban cigars, with Trinidad, and also Romeo and Julieta, Churchill Añejo. So you can go to the website. And then also our last one for the year is on the 17th of December, which is a mixed Robusto sampler, which is all products supplied through Davidoff with their own products, or products that they do distribution for in the UK. That one will be with Glenfiddich, 15-year-old Solera. So go to the websites. They should all be listed, and look forward to welcoming you all on the Zoom calls for the rest of the year. It's been great to actually do these virtually, and we'll continue to do them into the new year if the lockdown continues. So thanks everyone for joining, and thank you to Roy for putting this together for us.
No problem at all. A pleasure as always. I think Mitchell just joined as well. So good evening, Mitchell, if you can hear us. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, for those who joined a little bit later, most of you will probably know me. I'm Roy. I'm the managing director for Davidoff in the UK. And this evening we've got a lovely session put up with C.Gars Ltd. We'll be smoking the new Davidoff Robusto Intenso. And to talk about all this, we've got Sam Rueter, who's the director of the Global Brand Ambassador Program, and also involved in a lot of the blending of the cigars. So he's the go-to guy for us within Davidoff. So here we talk about the cigar, and then we're lucky enough to have Drew Mayville, who has been the master blender at Buffalo Trace for over 40 years, as I understand. So anything bourbon related, we'll talk about as well. That's why we have the Eagle Rare, which we chose as the pairing for this cigar. So yeah, so I think we'll start with a quick introduction I think Drew, we'll start with you. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, actually my career goes back, like I said, over 40 years. I started out in a distillery, actually in Canada, and it was the Joseph E. Seagram Distillery. So that's a name from the past most of you probably have never heard of. And I started out in the distillery learning about the process of making Canadian whiskey. And about a couple years into my career, I was offered a position in bottling, which was across the hallway. And being in the distillery, nobody wanted to go to bottling. They wanted to stay in the distillery because that was the place to retire, basically. It was a career. So I was the youngest, and they asked me to go over to the bottling area, and that's where I learned how to start tasting, because you had to look at samples, approve samples, etc., because it was the quality area. And after that, my career went through many positions. Eventually, I moved to Montreal and became the master blender for Seagram after quite a few years. Then a company called Diageo bought Seagram, and I went with Diageo for a couple years. And then I got the calling to come to a distillery in Kentucky called Buffalo Trace Distillery 16 years ago. And 16 years ago, Buffalo Trace Distillery wasn't a very well-known distillery. As a matter of fact, anybody that I would talk to about it back then, they would always ask, where is that? And then in just a short 16 years since I've been here, we've become one of the most well-known distilleries in the world, and well-known for the quality of the products that we produce here. So I've been very fortunate to work for three very large companies, Seagram being the first, Diageo the second, but probably the most challenging and exciting has been with Buffalo Trace Distillery. In building this distillery and the reputation, being part of that whole process has been very exciting professionally for me. And what's exciting to me is that I just don't get involved with Buffalo Trace products. I actually am the master blender for Sazerac, which is the parent company of Buffalo Trace. I don't know if you've heard of that name, but Sazerac is all over the world. We have distilleries all over the world. We have one in Montreal. We have one in Cognac region in France. Not a Canadian whiskey, but a Cognac distillery. We own Irish whiskey brands. We have an Indian distiller now. We make some of the finest single malts, at least in India. So I get involved somewhat with all these different distilleries and segments of the Sazerac empire, which is pretty exciting for me because it's just not about whiskey and bourbon. It's about everything else that we do. We have tequila. I work on rums. So that's what's exciting to somebody who's been in the business for 40 years. And you said, what do I do? Well, you really have to enjoy tasting and drinking. I don't know, anybody probably on this call probably enjoys tasting and drinking, right?
Sure, yeah.
If you smoke cigars, obviously you enjoy taste. Not just with bourbon, but with cigars. So there's lots of complexities and differences, I'm sure, between all these different cigars, even though I don't smoke cigars, unfortunately. But same with bourbon and whiskeys, is every product is different. Each one has its own fingerprint. You can describe it differently. You can enjoy it differently. And that's the allure of tasting and blending for me, is all these different products. And one thing I do appreciate at Buffalo Trace and Sazerac is that one thing we believe is that we can make better products. So even though we win more awards than any other distillery on the planet, we believe truly that we need to make better products, different products for the future. So we don't sit around waiting, just pushing these products out. We are always in a mode of development and experimentation. And that's another reason that a master blender would be excited, because you have all these new tastes and profiles that you get to work with, which is really, really exciting for me professionally. I tell you, I don't look at the watch too often during the course of a day because we're always tasting. So we taste early in the morning throughout the whole day, but we pace ourselves because you can become very burnt out pretty quickly. As a matter of fact, when we taste, we dilute our samples down to around 20% ABV. And the reason we do that, when we look at, say, for instance, single barrels, what we want to do is look for differences. And for us, when you reduce it with the water, you can see the differences a lot easier. We're not there to enjoy the products. We're there to make a decision on the products. So when we do our single barrels, we look at probably 50 to maybe 200 samples, depending on the day and what we're looking at. But we also do many, many other tastings during the day. So some days you could be looking upwards of 300-400 samples that we'd have to taste. Again, it's all diluted, so it's not as impactful, but you do see differences easier when it is diluted. If I'm talking too much,
no, it's okay.
Roy, you just cut in and cut me off because I can talk for hours.
I think we'll go to Sam for a bit now.
Yeah.
Sam, can you imagine smoking 200 cigars a day to taste?
Well, that's a bit difficult, but like Drew starting in the morning, it sounds promising. I mean, okay, great. Thank you for explaining, Drew. It's very interesting. We had actually a session before with Eagle Rare and with the in Austria and in Germany session together with Gunther.
Yeah.
Who's the export manager, and also very interesting. So glad you are here, and it's always nice to talk to a master blender. So my function, as Roy just quickly mentioned, a global brand ambassador and also head of innovation for Davidoff. So I have a lot to do with our master blenders, being a little bit like, you can see it like the bridge between marketing and product innovation, and making sure that we deliver beautiful cigars to all of you. So also from my side, welcome everybody. It's again a pleasure. Here in Switzerland, we are still not in a lockdown, so I hope that you guys in the UK and all around the world are not too long in a lockdown. So today we have the pleasure of enjoying one of the Robusto Intenso, and Roy, I don't know how, but I mean, they're everywhere sold out. I kept my last cigar for this session, so I was like very proud to enjoy this with all of you.
I still have a box, that's okay.
So lucky that you guys have them in the UK, recently launched. And yeah, I hope that everybody has a cigar in maybe in the right hand, the nice Eagle Rare in the left hand, so we can do a little bit of the pairing together. And yeah, so I can start a bit about the background of the cigar, Roy. Or,
if you could, please, yeah.
Yeah. I can share you a little bit my screen. Don't worry, it won't be too long. Okay. So Robusto Intenso, the name might sound familiar to some of you because we have launched it actually in 2005, the first time. Robusto Intenso, as you can, well, from the name already, Intenso means it's a quite complex cigar. It's a quite intense cigar when it comes to flavors rather than strength, in my opinion. The story, it's basically very easy. It's describing these 6 stars. And the 6 stars, basically each star is representing a different tobacco in the cigar. You can see here on the idea, also packaging, you have beautiful box of 10 cigars. Then you have these 5-pound wooden boxes that we did for global travel retail, for them to sell. And as I mentioned, launched in 2005. And for us, let's say the innovation part in this project is basically reproducing a blend that has been launched in 2005 and launching in 2020. And that's why on the left, top left corner, you have the vintage blend symbol, meaning that we have tobaccos in there which have been aged for 7 years, which is quite unusual in the cigar industry. Plus, if you compare the blend 2005 versus the blend 2020, there's only one filler tobacco from a different zone and a different binder. That's all. All the rest is the same tobacco. There's always what I'm saying. We have over $25 million stock of tobacco, and this is one of the reasons we are so proud of having it. Then if you go a little bit more, I hope that everybody's enjoying the cigar in the first third. If you look at the taste and cigar experience, you can see that it's mainly Dominican-based or Dominican-based tobacco in the cigar. But for me, if you enjoy the cigar and if you concentrate on the aromas, it's untypical Dominican. It's a huge complexity. You can see you have some nutty flavors, creaminess, dark chocolate. You have also these pepper notes, especially when you do the retrohale through the nose, which for me is very exciting. You see also here, we always say, what is the intensity? 4.5, the enjoyment time. Of course, we're talking about the Robusto format. And just the last slide, which I think it's very nice to explain to you, what are these stars? As I mentioned, it's related to each tobacco, and here we go into a little bit more deeper into the blend itself by highlighting you these different tobaccos. So we start with the Yamasa Visus. Yamasa, you know from our Yamasa line, our field a little bit north from Santo Domingo, a very reddish soil. So you have this high intensity spiciness, peppery note, but also like this long and intense aftertaste. aged for 7 years. Then you have a Piloto Visus, aged for 4 years. Piloto is a typical Dominican seed, which gives you, again, a little bit more of this, I would say, balancing a little bit out the Yamasa tobacco. Then you have a San Vicente Mejorado Ligero for 6 years of aging. Mejorado is basically a hybrid of our own that we created and giving you these beautiful coffee notes and also a little bit this acidity into the blend. Then you have another filler tobacco, which is a hybrid called 254 Visus, which aged for 5 years. And then basically binder, San Vicente Seco, very nice for the combustion, 4 years. And the Habano Ecuador wrapper, which for us is normally aged for 3 years, giving you again a little bit this creaminess and these complex flavors to the cigar. So I hope I hope it was not too deep in terms of information, but I think it's always interesting when you have these kind of flavors in the cigars, in a cigar, where they're coming from. So how each tobacco is playing a role in the blend and delivering you these different flavors.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, it's always great to bring back old releases, and it's always fascinating to see how close the two releases are to one another. You know, even though there's a 15-year time difference.
Yes.
So when we look at pairing, so the pairing suggestion was bourbon with the cigar because of the vanilla notes and the sweet notes to really go with the spiciness of the cigar. Remember, I then suggested at some point, let's try Eagle Rare, and I think you tried it with Sazerac as well, which is also one of Drew's
Yes.
bourbons. So how would you explain how the two marry together?
Well, you know that so basically you have to imagine from a legal perspective, we can't just name brand globally that we want to do pairing with or partnership, you know, due to different markets. So what we do is we then suggest, for example, an Islay whiskey or a Speyside whiskey, more fruitiness, or a rum, you know. And in this case, we said, okay, we had a lot of rums, whiskeys in the last time, so let's focus on a bourbon. Bourbon is very strong in the US, in Canada, and at least I have the feeling it's moving a bit to Europe. I think we're getting more open to try bourbon. And for me, having this complexness in the cigar with this kind of spicy peppery notes, and then you have this nice vanilla, this caramel, and this very nice structure of the Eagle Rare bourbon, I think it's just matching perfectly together. And so that was the attention behind it. Do maybe some a pairing that maybe you're not doing every day, or that maybe we haven't been so much, we haven't gained so much expertise in bourbon over the last years. But I think it's trading up, and I think it becomes very interesting. So
Good, thank you. Drew, the first question I want to start with is maybe a question you might get a lot, or as I mentioned, in Europe, maybe bourbon is not as popular maybe as whiskey. Could you explain the main difference between whiskey and bourbon?
Well, bourbon is a very specific whiskey. It's has to be made in the United States of America. It has to be at least 51% corn, and it has to be distilled no higher than 160 proof, which is 80% alcohol. And you cannot add any flavorings, colorings, or anything like that. So that's one of the reasons it's in a new barrel, because it's very strong flavors, and the new barrel actually can withstand it, and the whiskey can withstand it. And so bourbon is a very specific US centric whiskey that has very specific guidelines as far as how you make it.
Okay. And when was Eagle Rare for the first time kind of released or brought out into the market?
Well, that's a good question. We actually, Sazerac bought the brand name from Seagram back 20 some years ago. And we've taken that brand and built the brand into quite a very prestigious portfolio of Eagle Rare products now. I think somebody had Eagle Rare 17. I have the Double Eagle Very Rare here, which is 20 years old, which is quite old for a bourbon. So it's one of those things in this industry, you buy brands from other companies and you basically build the brands based on that. So it wasn't a new brand that Sazerac had. We bought it from a company, and we've built the brand since then. So over the last 20 years.
Okay. You just mentioned that the double rare, the double eagle, that it's quite rare. You know, it's 20 years old. And you said 20 years is quite old for bourbon.
Yes, sir.
Bourbon kind of have a max aging period.
Yeah, because a lot of manufacturers here in the U.S. would say that's too old, but a lot of our awards come from our products that are quite old, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody would like it to be younger. Like the balance would be probably a little bit better if it's younger, like Buffalo Trace being 8 years, around 8 years. But what it does when you age it up to 15 to 20, the way we age it, is you actually have more complexity. I see just by your presentation from the cigars, Sam, that you actually age this in different ages, and that's going to add to the complexity and the diversity of the products. So as we age our bourbons up, what we find is that the complexity increases and the sophistication of it increases. Because if you take a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, it's very simple. It hasn't had the chance to mature and develop the way it should. So a lot of our products are, we have everything from 3, 4, all the way up to 20 plus. So what we're actually working on at Buffalo Trace is how do you extend it beyond those 20, 25, 30 years? And I think we have the Scotch industry to thank for it, because a lot of Scotches are aged quite a long time. At minimum, the good ones are aged at least 10. But you get lots that are aged since the 50s and 60s that are worth quite a bit of money. But in Scotland,
I think Macallan just released a 70-year-old.
Right. So you would never age a bourbon 70 years, because what happens is it's a new barrel. By law, it has to be a new barrel. And that would overpower anything that would develop and mature in that product. So we're actually doing some really, really interesting experiments with our Warehouse P. And what we're doing is slowing down the aging process. And so what we want to do is age a bourbon much longer, and see how that turns out. We got a good feeling that it might turn out really special, but you're not letting the wood overwhelm the flavor profile.
Sure.
So that's exciting for us, is that we're trying things. But if you go to any manufacturer here in Kentucky, most of them will say that, oh, you can't age bourbon more than 8-10 years. But we've been doing it for many years, and now those manufacturers are starting to age them longer. You can see a lot of new releases that are much older.
Yeah.
So it's pretty exciting. It's just that you can't, let the wood dominate, because then it becomes like you're tasting inside of a barrel. So we have techniques to mitigate that by where we place it in our warehousing.
Okay. I think Tobias had a question. Yeah, he wondered if temperature control can help a bit for longer aging.
Yes, Warehouse P is being temperature controlled, but we also have a warehouse we call Warehouse X that you can Google on and search on, and you can get a website. And that warehouse was built only to experiment, because we believe that just because you build a warehouse like they've done for centuries doesn't mean it's the best way to age bourbon. So we're trying to learn on how to age whiskeys and bourbons and other things the best way. So this warehouse is very small. There's only around 120 barrels in this warehouse. And it's divided into 5 chambers, and we can control the environment in those 5 chambers. And so we're experimenting on temperature, airflow, all the variables through these different experiments, trying to learn about what ages our products and what can we make how can we make a better product?
Okay.
But it's interesting because I can see innovation is also an important, let's say, point or pillar for you. And the same, like also we have in the Dominican, we have so-called secret garden, which is quite of small, but it's the area where we grow the hybrids. We do the experiments with different seeds, and you can see it's like a hidden pleasure, like for our agronomists, master blenders to get new tastes, how you can involve those new seeds into the blends, and it's, I think innovation is fun, right? If you do it well and you get a great result, then you're like, wow, nice.
Yeah, really.
You get to be creative.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The innovation is part of our culture. And I said at the beginning is that we experiment, and that's exciting for a blender or a distiller. But even though we win all these awards and we have great products now, we believe tomorrow you need new products, and that's how you get it, is through the innovation piece. And I see that you're doing the same thing in your company, so that's pretty exciting to be part of that whole process.
Yeah, we have also the Camacho American Barrel Age, where we actually ferment tobacco in bourbon barrels, which gives you this kind of sweetness to the tobacco, but all natural. We never apply any alcohol directly to the leaves, the tobacco leaves, but it's all through fermentation, through the heat. The same we do for the Winston Churchill Late Hour, where we have whiskey casks from Speyside area, where we ferment the tobacco for 4 to 5 years in this cask. And this is something that I think innovation-wise is quite interesting, but also very important for us, always keeping this natural aspect to it. Never going over the top by spraying tobacco leaves or by using different flavors that you basically change the taste of the tobacco.
Yeah. There was a question for you, Sam, from Ross. And so how does aging affect tobacco, and what sort of things can you do to affect the flavor profile as you age the tobacco?
So aging of the tobacco, so to start with, all our tobaccos are aged for minimum of 3 years, raw tobacco. While you age tobacco, it's basically really it's very much related to the time, right? It's obviously the time you give the tobacco. It's obviously related to cost and to a lot of labor involved. But at the end, as Drew mentioned with the bourbon, it gives you kind of complexity, but it gives you also a kind of elegance to the overall blend. You have to imagine that then basically, and it depends a little on the varieties of the tobacco. Not each tobacco leaf can age probably the same. Like for example, if you take a tobacco leaf that's a little bit thinner in structure, not so oily, this one is aging less than, for example, a very oily tobacco leaf, and which is quite of veiny and thick in structure. But I mean, in a nutshell, aging, it gives you a kind of elegance to the cigar. It gives you a kind of sophistication to it. The flavors, they're coming out much more. So you have to imagine, if you ask me, so when is the tobacco leaf ready? When is the aging maximum basically achieved, right? And this is the one of the challenges that our master blender has, basically trying each year the tobacco and really taking the decision to basically say, okay, now it has been aged to such a point that the summum is reached, the aromas are perfectly in place, and now we can use it for a blend. And this is always the excitement about aged tobaccos, to see how is the comparison between an aged one and the younger one. And yes.
So would you, sorry, just to jump in, would you, in the same way that Drew would taste barrels as they're aging and sort of monitor them, so you have someone that would go and sort of smoke the tobacco as it's, that's really interesting.
Yes. So we have the team of where we have the master blender and the team, which basically every day are trying. So you have to imagine we have 15 different zones in the Dominican Republic. These are called like micro zones. Like, for example, you can compare with the wine industry, whereas we have different soil, you have different climate conditions. And out of these 15 zones, you get a lot of tobacco, there are a lot of different varieties. So every day you try a different one, based on the zone, based on the grade of the leaf, and then based on the age. So basically you get a proper idea, okay, how is the tobacco evolving, And then basically I always call it the magic of blending is then, of course, to see how each tobacco leaf is interacting with each other in a perfect way, giving us the pleasure of a well-done cigar.
Thank you.
We not only age our products, but we also age our barrel staves, and we have specific requirements for that. So it just, as you were talking, it reminds me of seasoning or aging our barrel staves to prevent some of these undesirable components of the wood coming through in your final product. So there's a lot of complexity in both cigar making and bourbon whiskey. It's amazing.
Yes.
Radley had a question for you, Drew. So one more thought. He thought that bourbon was aged in warehouses open to the environment.
No, we have warehouses, so there's not open to the environment.
Okay.
But what happens is that from spring to fall we leave the windows open, so it's open in terms of airflow. But we did have a tornado come through, and one of the warehouses, the roof was taken off, and the wall fell down. The one side wall fell down, and it took us 5 months to repair it. And in the meantime, those barrels were exposed to the elements for 5 months. And what we found out is it made an excellent bourbon. And we actually took some of those barrels and we made a product called E.H. Taylor Tornado Surviving Bourbon. It's kind of funny, but it's actually a superb bourbon, and we lost 75% of the contents of those barrels. They were around 10 years old. And to this day, those bottles are very difficult to find, and they're worth quite a bit of money. As a matter of fact, we even have customers calling and ask when we're going to make some more.
Create a tornado, I guess. Yeah. Lawrence had a question about the angel share during the aging process. So what's the angel share for Eagle Rare?
Well, we lose when you first put, because it's a new barrel, when you put your bourbon, your distillate in the barrel, you lose 10% the first year. So 10% of what you put in goes into the wood and evaporation. And then every year thereafter in Kentucky, you lose around 4%. So you lose most of your barrel. So like as Pappy Van Winkle, 23-year-old, you have originally 53 gallons that goes in, and when it comes out, it's less than 10 gallons.
Whoa.
So a lot of that angel share, those angels are very, very happy.
I can imagine, yeah. So once you said you only use barrels, new barrels. So once your barrels are used and you're done with them, what do you do with them? Because you also mentioned you do whiskey in other countries. Did you go to India? Did you go to Ireland? Or?
I always kid the Scots. I tell them that I send it over there so they can improve their product. But they don't like it when I say that.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine.
No, we actually, because we are a global company, we have lots of uses internally. We have we actually have Canadian whiskey, which uses used barrels. We do a lot of work with tequila. We own a tequila brand. We have an Irish whiskey brand, and we have cognac. So we have a lot of internal use. And if we need to sell any, people will buy our barrels in a heartbeat because of the products that go in them. So there's always a good use for barrels. When the Scotch industry isn't taking any, then, you know, it goes up and down in cycles. They sell them as planters then.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Eagle Rare used to be just single barrel, I believe. But when did that change, and why did that change?
Well, I think it's we still do single barrel,
Okay.
but just to keep up with the demand. If you look at the process of a single barrel, everything that comes through on a single barrel, I have to taste, or my group has to taste. So we would be tasting day and night, and we would still never catch up.
Yeah.
So we do single barrel like Blanton's and other products on a regular basis, but something that has high volume, it's almost impossible to keep up with.
Okay.
But it doesn't really change the taste or the quality of the product. It just makes it more consistent.
Yeah. And Brandon had a question because you mentioned Irish whiskey. So he wants to know, what Irish whiskey brand do you have within your
We
portfolio?
have a brand called Paddy's.
Paddy's. Okay.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows Jameson. They used to own Paddy's,
Okay.
Pernod Ricard, and we bought that brand. It's the biggest brand in Ireland, actually.
Good.
If anyone wants to try it, I think Paul has some in puffin rooms as well.
Okay.
But he's on mute.
Yeah, so
Oh, there we go. Joe has some as well.
It's this one here. People recognise that one?
Oh, there we are. Yeah.
Brett.
There's a man
Well,
with
the
good taste.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to open puff rooms again soon, but it's looking like it'll be in the new year. But
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
certainly available through the majority of our Termos retail stores and also online at C.Gars.
Perfect.
Yeah, a little plug there as well.
Good sales pitch there, Ross. Yeah.
Always.
Quickly jumping back to Sam. So Davidoff over the last few years has released more kind of vintage blends, like the Especiales number 7. So when you look at the blends from the past, what makes the final decision on which one to bring back?
Good question, Roy. So basically, well, the vintage pillar has been mainly created to give like a little bit this connoisseur side back to our cigars by having the opportunity or having the expertise of relaunching these old blends, right? What we always check before is what is the percentage of tobacco we still have left in our warehouses, right? Because it doesn't really make sense if you claim a vintage blend and you're using like very young tobaccos in it. So this is one part of the decision. Plus the other one is also we listen a lot to our consumers or to you guys, to our retailers, and also taking into account if they're telling us, look, well, that was a super great cigar, like the Especiales 7, like the Special 53, and now the Robusto Intenso. Is there any chance you could bring those cigars back? And that, of course, is a challenge for us. Again, our expertise, the master blending, also the amount of tobacco we have in the warehouses, which part of the process or the decision taking why we bring back such a vintage blend. And I believe so far they have been very successful. And for me, what I'm always impressed with is those blend has been created like, I don't know, 2004, 5, even 2003. And at this time it was, Dominican tobacco was considered as being mild and not really excited. But now if you taste the cigars today, like the Robusto Intenso, for me it's a very complex cigar. And even I'm sure if you have this in a blind tasting without the ring, it's hard to guess the origin, because at the end you think, wow, it's a great cigar and it's almost all Dominican tobacco. So this is for me always this kind of surprise that it has, compared blends from 2005 to now. I mean, as you said, Roy, it's 15 years apart, but still you can feel this complexity in the cigar, which I think it's again back to this aging of the tobacco. What gives these aged tobaccos to the cigar, this elegance, but also this complexity. And I think you can filter out very nice the flavors of the cigar. It's not too difficult because the cigars are not too strong in terms of nicotine.
Perfect. I think Tom had just had a question. Is there any plans for Davidoff UK only release? So I'll answer that, I guess. We've done a few actually. We did one with for the Orchard Selection a few years ago, which was the Lancero London edition. I'm not quite sure if there's any left, Paul or Mitchell.
There's a small number of boxes left.
Yeah. Then this year we did one for the Davidoff London 40th anniversary, which is a number 2 size. And next year there's one coming, which is a Liverpool edition, which is coming next year. So that's UK only. So that's also through Orchard Selection. So available to
where there's so many any auction selection Lanceros left.
Sorry?
One of my clients bought the last 6 boxes today.
Yeah.
Oh, lucky one.
I think Liverpool has a couple of boxes left.
Yeah.
Okay, covet them. Put the price up to £100 per puff.
I think Anthony just put the link up for the Lancero in the chat box. So,
We've got a handful of singles left, but
Handful of
do snap them
singles.
up quickly because I might snap them up myself. So
oh, you need to increase the price, I just heard. So, so yeah, so we.
I think the Liverpool is going to be a Robusto size, and it's Q2 next year.
I think it's Toro actually. Yeah, Toro size.
Oh, Toro.
Yeah, yeah. It's Q2, so probably June next year. Yeah, yeah. So that answers your question, I hope. 300 boxes available of 10 next year. So yeah, we so Davidoff makes a couple of I think it's about 20 country editions a year. Is that correct? About the right amount, Sam?
Yes, more or less, yes.
20-ish, yeah, yeah. Either for very good partnerships we have, like we have with C.Gars. So this year there was one, an Italy edition, for example. There was one for Beirut. Normally the US gets a few for some of their retailers, but they were good opportunity for us to try something different and to support our local our loyal partners in creating something specifically for them. So. What's next for Davidoff, Sam? What's coming up next, which you can tell us about?
Well, 2021 is all set. There you're going to have some nice surprises with a new line under the brand of Davidoff, but also under a different brand, which will be very excited. We have again a couple of limited editions that we bringing back. Of course, I'm now on 22, 23, which will also be very exciting. Always thinking along this innovation, which is really deep in our DNA. You know, what can we deliver else taste-wise to you guys? And there are many projects. I mean, you have to imagine Davidoff is priority number 1, then Camacho and Arvo, and always under these 3 brands we do a lot of innovations. Camacho, Arvo mainly led by the US, and then Davidoff obviously global. I think just now we're going to release, I think on the 16th of November, the Davidoff Year of the Ox in our Chinese zodiac signs, yes. And then I'm already on the blend for the tiger, and then I think it comes the rabbit. So there is always a lot on the plate, and you have to imagine in terms of our innovation process, from the idea until the finished cigar in the market, it takes around 18 months. That's why we have to plan a lot ahead, taking into consideration a lot of feedbacks from our consumers, from our retailers. What are a little bit the trends in the markets? What can we do different? And this is always very, I think, very exciting to work upon, and also to then basically when you have the cigar in your hand and you try it and you think back about all of these process steps, all the tasting of the samples, and then basically if you get well rated, or if our dear consumers are enjoying the cigar, that's always a great feedback.
Yes. So yeah, you have the Ox, as you mentioned. So yeah, within the next 2 weeks, the press release went out last week. So it's going to be a big one, as the Ox is quite a big and strong animals. It's going to be 6x60 for those who enjoy big ring gauges. The box is always beautiful, red lacquer with gold, and as it red and gold is the colors for Chinese New Year. So that's going to be an exciting cigar again to add to the Zodiac edition. Kind of going back to Drew, I guess the same question, Drew. So is Eagle Rare trying to do something else? Because we've got the Eagle Rare as we're drinking it today. You've got the 17-year-old and then the 20-year-old you mentioned. Is there anything coming in between, kind of between the 10 and the 17, or is there any project you're working on?
I'd have to kill you if I told you that.
I'll take my chances.
No, we usually do not talk about what we're going to release, which is contrary to what you do. Mm-hmm. But we have something new all the time, whether it be bourbon or other products. We have new products. As a matter of fact, I'm in charge of the new product development for Sazerac.
Okay.
And we have countless products that we are introducing. Right now, the rage in the US is low proof products. So in other words, low ABV. So we can sell them in the grocery stores and stuff. So we
Okay.
can compete with beer. So we get involved with everything here, not just bourbon.
And
Because I guess
what is
the-
your innovation time, Drew? Like, for example, on the idea until the finished spirit in the bottle?
Well, that's really a great question because it can be from 1 hour to 40 years.
4D.
Yeah, like bourbon, for instance, you sometimes you need to wait a long time, and some of our experiments are out 40, 50 years from now. At the same time, we can make a flavored product here within an hour. We have flavor scientists here that can develop it immediately, whatever we're looking for. So we make products like Fireball, if you've ever heard of Fireball.
I think
No.
Tobias is asking. Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah, I think Tobias is asking Sazerac Applejack, if that's ever going to come to the market.
We have something for everybody, basically.
Perfect.
Just to tell you, I think I know this is a product that's already available in the US, but is it Copper Dog, Drew? Correct me if I'm wrong, the peanut butter whiskey?
What's it called?
Is it Copper Dog or Sheepdog?
Oh, our peanut butter whiskey.
Peanut. So we've just had a couple of samples in the UK of that, which I believe is already out in the US. So I don't think I'm breaking any bylaws
Not
there.
telling any secrets, right?
But yeah, I'm really excited to try that. I've seen a bottle yet to get my samples. So.
Yeah, so that's kind of the range we work on. Everything, even from flavored right through to the finest products you can buy for money. So that's really exciting for us.
I guess it is very exciting, yeah. I guess, yeah, with Davidoff, it's pretty simple. Sometimes it takes a long time to get to a product. I guess the Yamasa is a good example for Davidoff, Sam. That kind of took over 20 years from idea to really realization.
Yes.
I think that's probably the best example we can give.
Yes, probably, yes, because sometimes you have like this idea or this vision in your head, right? And you want to achieve it, but then sometimes the soil is not playing in your cards. You have to. And you can always harvest once a year, so it takes quite a time, and it took us really 20 years to, let's say, tame down the earth in Yamasa or make it usable, for our tobacco, and I think, but still, at the end, if you follow this process and these years, it's always interesting year by year, and you're hoping, oh, now we got it, but then the leaf is too small, or the plant is not growing enough, and this is something that takes time, obviously, and the same when we launched in 2013 Nicaragua. For us, it was a kind of delicate project because it was part of the discovery pillar, so the first discovery line using the black ring, and then also it was for us. It took us more than 1 year in terms of blending because sometimes we weren't sure. Okay. Our master blender always put Dominican tobacco with it, whereas we said no, we want to have 100% Nicaraguan puro. And he was still convinced, no, but the Dominican tobacco is as good as Nicaragua one. And we had to convince them that yes, but what our consumers want or what we want is to have 100% Nicaraguan cigar. And sometimes it takes a little bit of convincing, but it's also an eye-opener, I believe, Sometimes maybe you as a master blender, you don't think about certain ideas, but you get inputs, be it from the market or be it from myself. And then basically they try their best, and at the end they're also convinced, and that is also a very nice challenge that we have. Yeah.
One thing we learned, Roy, is that we do a lot of experiments here, and most of our experiments never amount to anything. So we're always trying different things. Sometimes we get lucky, like we did with our 4-grain. It started out as an experiment. Took around 10 to 12 years, and then we found it was an excellent whiskey. And then we actually made it again, so it took another 10 years. So it's, in that case, it turned out to be one of the best whiskeys in the world, and it took probably 20, 25 years to develop.
Okay.
Wow.
So how many bottles of Eagle Rare get produced on an annual basis on average?
No idea.
No, that many.
As many as we have.
Yeah.
Well, all I know is one thing is that we are making more of everything. For the 16 years I've been at Buffalo Trace, we've always made more. It's just never enough.
Okay, that's a good position to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is the process different for the Eagle Rare as it is for the 17-year-old and the double rare? Or is it just the aging process which is the main difference?
It's more than just age. It's the taste profile that we go by. So some locations where we age our bourbon, some age faster, some slower. So we have to really be careful where we're aging because that determines the taste profile that we're looking for. So sometimes if it's age declared, then we have to use at least that. But then we would, you may need 12-year-old product because it hasn't aged as fast, depending on where it's aging. So there's a lot of technical details you have to worry about as a blender. But the idea is to have the same taste profile.
Okay. Nick, Ian, you had a question for Drew.
Drew, hello. I'm really enjoying this. Thank you. I had the pleasure earlier this year to taste for the first time some Pappy Van Winkle with some American friends, and very interesting and a very great length to it. Perhaps you could tell us a bit about that, and also perhaps for those of us who that isn't in our everyday budget, what would be another really premium whiskey that's a bit more reasonably priced for the drinker?
Bourbon.
Yeah, so if Pappy Van Winkle is, when I first came to Buffalo Trace, you could buy it anywhere and nobody was buying it. Then all of a sudden it got some press, and lo and behold, years later, 10 years later, it became one of the most sought after bourbons in the world. You win some awards. People talk about it. It's hard to get because it's aged 23 years. I don't know, people go searching for it basically. But it is 23 years, and it's, as I said from the beginning, as you age a bourbon and it's aged gracefully for 23 years, it's going to taste a little bit oaky, but also the maturity or the complexity will be much greater. And so it's got a illustrious following of people who seek it, and unfortunately the price we sell it retail, we suggest the retail to be $2.99. Unfortunately, it's going to be very difficult to find it that price anywhere, so it's being marked up for thousands of dollars US. But it's just because of its rarity, its complexity, and people enjoy it, especially with a nice cigar, I suspect, because of that woodiness and the complexity. But as far as what would be a good value, you might be able to get in the UK and Europe is our 12-year-old Weller. As a matter of fact, I think France we just introduced the 12-year-old, so you'll be able to get it there. But what that is, ever since I started here 16 years ago, the 12-year Weller has been the best priced, best tasting product that we have at Buffalo Trace, in my opinion. And what that is it's a wheated bourbon. And same with Pappy Van Winkle, but 12 years is a real sweet spot. And so if you want a really great bourbon, and a wheated bourbon that's soft, Weller 12-year-old is fantastic bourbon. But good luck in finding it, Ian.
Thank you.
Anthony helped us a little bit. He put links into the Cigars website for Pappy Van Winkle and the Weller overall bourbon, so you can find it there. Anthony's
always on the ball, Roy. Always on the ball, don't you?
Always on the ball. Yeah.
So
I can see why they put you in charge of marketing.
So the question is to Ross: is there any more Weller available at the moment?
I thought that might be coming. BTAC is dropping. It's dropping in the UK at the end of this month. Weller, we don't have any due for until at least after Christmas, I think. But yeah, the BTAC is the next release that you'll be getting, which I will be contacting you next week about, Paul.
Brilliant.
As I understand, you have a mash bill number 1. Is that correct? Drew, yeah. So how does Eagle Rare differ from other bourbons using the same mash bill?
In several different ways. It's the same mash bill, but it's aged a different time frame, and also the placement of where the barrels are. So, I mean, it's really a blender's choice, and we have warehousing here that go back centuries and more modern. So they're all different warehouses. They're all constructed a little bit different. So they're all going to age a little bit differently. So it's really up to me to decide, you know, where these barrels are chosen from for these products and the taste profile that we're trying to match. So that's what a blender actually does. But there is a big difference. I don't know if I can share this on the screen. Let me see.
Should be able to, yeah.
Just let me grab it here. I want to show you, if I can, our family tree. Let me find it. Okay, I'll just share it just a sec, if I can.
Gotta close all those experiments down.
Yeah. If you accidentally share some secret information, we won't tell.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, just pause the recording.
Exactly. Perfect. Yep.
So this gives you an idea of the different recipes. You can see in the bottom.
Yep.
Got mash number 1. So these are the products that we make with mash number 1. So that has a certain recipe and taste profile based on the recipe. The number 2 is all those products from Blanton's to Elmer T. Lee. And that's a little bit higher rye recipe, so it's a little bit different taste profile. And then you have our famous wheated bourbon up to Pappy Van Winkle. And then our rye whiskeys, which are very popular. And rye is not a bourbon. These are straight ryes, which means at least 51% is rye. So the taste profile is quite a bit different because of the predominance of the rye flavor. So it's spicy, peppery that you actually... So in helping pairing with a cigar, it depends on the recipe and how it accents or complements the cigar. So this would be helpful in determining that because of the taste profiles of these different bourbons. Now, this is not all we make. These are some of the core brands that we make, or the core recipes. We also have other recipes that we do in small amounts, like our 4-grain, which is a superb whiskey, and others too. So this is just an example of our family tree that gives you an idea of the different products like you were saying. And I differentiate based on age, proof, location, and my selection of these. I hope that... Whoop.
Yeah, that's very interesting, actually.
Yeah. And then Drew, one question, because you know, in the cigar, like for us, consistency is one of the main factors, or that we are so proud of, that we are consistent in our cigars. So basically, when you taste the Davidoff number 2 in Hong Kong or in Europe or the US, year after year, it tastes the same, right? So how do you do with consistency in all the bourbons or in all the rye whiskeys?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So our brands like Buffalo Trace and Eagle Rare, that's what we try to do, is have that consistency based even on the variation that we have, and that's what a master blender does. But at the same time, we celebrate the diversity of flavors, because that gives you a palette to make all these different products that we have at Buffalo Trace. So for example, I can put a whiskey on the top floor that's pretty warm and pretty hot in the summer versus one on the bottom floor, and they'll be totally different whiskeys, even if it's the same juice that went in the beginning. So what that tells you is that you can celebrate that diversity. So the consistency is one piece, but the diversity is another piece, because that really builds on our new product development for what we use.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
A question for you both, Sam and Drew. When creating a new bourbon or spirit and a new cigar. What's the initial thought process?
Go ahead, Sam.
So
Give Drew a
basically,
bit of time to think about it. Yeah.
so basically, when product development starts at Davidoff, it's always linked to the concept or to the initiative. What do we want to achieve in terms of, let's say, call it marketing, or how should the initiative look like? And then basically I tie the cigar to this idea, to this concept, to this initiative. So I then write like, I call this a cigar brief, whereas I put in background, I put in strategy, I put in a little bit blend description, maybe some requirements if we need to use tobaccos from different origins. The format is in there, and this is basically the kick-off for our master blend to start thinking, but in a way that I want to make sure that he's not losing his creativity. So he has a kind of background information. He knows where the cigar should go towards, and then basically he creates the blend. And we have an internal tasting panel that I'm leading with our CEO, members of the family of Davidoff, and we always taste the cigar against the concept. Because if you're looking for a strong cigar and the cigar sample is mild, then basically you're off. The same with the flavors. You know, if one initiative, for example, Winston Churchill cigars, it was mandatory that basically you have this complexity of Sir Winston Churchill, the man in the cigar, which we did by using 4 different origins and having each origin playing a crucial role in the blend. And this is kind of always link it back to the initiative, and then really try that the initiative, whatever we say in the story, is 100% linked with the cigar.
And for you, Drew?
Well, after we drank enough, we started experimenting and making new products. No, actually, we have many different ways to come up with new products. One of them is being our experimental. We actually are experimenting all the time. So we're developing new products all the time. Another way is our marketing comes up with a concept like Sam was talking about, and we can develop that. Now, whether it's bourbon, it's more difficult, but when it's other products with flavors, we can do it pretty quick. We do that all the time, so that's pretty normal for us. But the thing that I like the best, the third option, is just, blank piece of paper making a new product. We're encouraged to do that here. When I worked for Diageo and I worked for Seagram, you basically maintained what you had. Whereas here, it's encouraged to do these things. So I make stuff myself all the time. And what I think would be good, so when I first came here, I made a Buffalo Trace cream product. And that was, nobody asked me for it. Nobody demanded it. What I did is I thought it would be a good idea. Oh, there's someone has. Greg has that.
My favorite.
Well, there's a product that was my idea and I executed on it. As a matter of fact, the CEO of the company, we were having a dinner and I said, why don't we make a bourbon cream? Because it's a hole that we have in our portfolio. And he says, go do it. So it's encouraged this type of development, which is really unusual because you don't see it too many places. And it ends up being a really great product. Recently, another one has been, you probably don't have this one, Greg. It's called Mr. Sam.
Oh, so I like it.
You have it?
No, I like the name.
It's named after Sam Bronfman, who started the Seagram empire. But it's a blend of whiskeys from US and Canada, and it's actually a great product. A lot of accolades around the industry about it. Very limited release. So this type of creation is encouraged in our company. So there's multiple avenues or variety of ways to make new product development. Probably most of it comes through the marketing team, maybe 60%. The experimental we always do, so that's 30-40%, and then 5 or 10% is that creating your own products.
Okay. And if you're on your day off and you want to relax, what do you normally drink? Because during work you're always tasting all day. So what is the drink that makes you sit back and relax?
Well, they're all my children, so to speak, right?
Sorry?
I said they're all my children. I can't
Exactly,
pick.
yeah. You can't pick one? No.
But usually what I tell people, and it's a little bit of a smart aleck comment, but it's the one we haven't made yet.
That is a good comment. And what, in your opinion, is the best way to drink whiskey or bourbon? Because there's normally a lot of debate about it, but what would be your recommendation?
Straight.
Straight, yeah.
Neat. Well, lots of people, I advise people to drink it the way they enjoy it. Everybody is different. Some people are a little bit snobbish about, drinking it a certain way, but I really encourage people to drink it the way they want. But please try to stay away from the Coca-Cola and ginger ale and stuff like that.
I think Ross gave the same answer yesterday. So yeah, just drink it the way you want to drink it. So
yeah, I think that's
you're aligned within the company. That's good.
Well, if you think about it, if you put ice in it, you're really deadening your senses to enjoy it. But if that's the way you enjoy it, go for it.
And Ross actually had a question for you. If you want to ask it, Ross.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if I was muted. The old Sam product you mentioned, do you know if that's available outside the US? I know it's something that I haven't heard of before, which is quite interesting.
Probably not available because we made about 1,000 bottles.
Okay.
It's very limited and very rare. Like everything we make, it's sold out, so it's very difficult to get. But I promise you that we are making more, as you know, Ross. We're making more of everything. It's just a matter of bourbon needs a few years to age, unfortunately, but there will be making more of it. So we actually are investing over $1 billion now over the next 10 years on increasing capacity. And like I said at the beginning, every year I've been here, we've made more. It's just never enough because of the demand.
So then just if anyone does want to see that as well, the Buffalo Trace website, I know we've recently updated that, and you can go on and see sort of a map of the distillery where we're expanding, which is I found really cool when I first saw it. So.
Yeah, it's neat to be here, witnessing all the expansion, because for many years this place never expanded. As a matter of fact, back in late 90s, they were almost closing this place down. So it's really turned around, and it was a diamond in the rough that just needed the leadership from our company, and that's where our CEO got involved, and now we're one of the best known distilleries on the planet.
With your barrels, you mentioned that you aged the sleek's already aged before you make the barrels, but where do you get the wood from?
Usually just from central northern U.S. It's some of the best oak trees for our products. Maybe we'll run out someday. I don't know. We'll have to start planting, but it takes a good 70 to 80 years to age for a tree to grow to the size where you harvest it for barrels.
Have you tried using different types of oak, like French oak or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've been doing that for 20 years. As a matter of fact, when I first came, we did experiments with different ones, but now we actually have a brand that we have, and we're releasing selective oaks from around the world that you can buy. It's called Charter Oak. And unfortunately, you probably won't get too much over there, but basically we've got I think we've released a Mongolian oak, a Canadian oak, French oak, which is really good. So we're showing people by using different types of oaks how the taste varies, and it's really taken off really well. So we do try. That was one of our experiments many years ago, and now it's actually a product.
Okay. A similar question to you, Sam. You mentioned earlier the commercial American barrel aged. So that's aged in bourbon barrels. How long did it take the company to source the kind of barrels which we thought it would work best for that cigar?
Well, it was quite of quick. We got them. I don't remember the brand, but we got them from the US. Basically, the challenge was more about to define which tobacco we're using to age in the barrels, right? Because depending on depending on the spirits that we have in the barrel, so basically you have to choose a tobacco that is strong enough to not absorb all the flavors, but still giving you part of the flavors back in the cigar. And that was basically the challenge, choosing the right tobacco and then also monitoring how long you keep it in the barrel. When is the summer? And that was for us these 4 to 5 months in the barrels. And so for this bourbon one, we took a Yamasa leaf that we put in the bourbon barrels, because Yamasa is kind of thicker in terms of tobacco. And Yamasa, if you smoke it 100%, you get this spiciness to it, the earthiness. And the spiciness is tamed down a bit by this nice, I call vanilla or Swedish flavors of the bourbon. And this gives a really great taste experience in a cigar.
Okay. Drew, when you make a bourbon, do you ever make a bourbon and you think, okay, you prepare it to be a certain brand, but then when the finished product is there, you think, oh, it doesn't work with that particular brand profile, and then you change it to a different brand?
Yeah, well, we would do a couple things. If it's not aging properly, we can move it in our warehouses. In other words, we can move it to a different location. If it gets to the point where it's not going to matter, it's not going to help. We want a different, it's not aging the way it should for some reason. We would get barrels from somewhere else, and you put those barrels somewhere else to age differently so we could use it for something. We got lots of flexibility here because we have over 25 different warehouses that we can use. And like I said before, a lot of them are different construction and different ventilation, whether they have brick warehouses, metal, or whatever. So we have a lot of variabilities that we can actually change the variables and change the product. But normally we would see that it's not aging. For instance, if it was too low or it's cool, we would move it to a higher floor to finish the aging process. So we got a lot of tricks up our sleeve.
Okay, so for example, that's interesting because we have once analyzed like all the different seeds we have. We have more than 80 seeds that we create by ourselves, 50 microzones in the Dominican, different origins tobacco, like 7 different origins we take the tobacco from. So we could potentially do 7 million different blends. And so when I ask our master blender, where do you get this inspiration from? Sometimes he says, well, during sleeping. So he has always like a notebook next to his bed when he's dreaming about the blend, or sometimes it's classical music, or it's just like, when an idea pops up in his head. And this is something I wanted to ask you, Drew. How do you come up with your, let's say, innovation input or your idea, when you get creative, or how do you do this, when you have something new in mind, or what is your inspiration coming from?
Well, as a matter of fact, the other night I had inspiration. It was when I was sleeping. It's exactly the same.
Okay.
For some reason, and I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's very interesting, but because I think we're going to do it. But it's different times. But when you're not thinking of work, when you're not at work, when you're at work, it's difficult to do. Actually, we do try to brainstorm. For new products, we have a meeting here for our experimental team, and we get together and we talk and we brainstorm together on new ideas. So that's one opportunity that is the traditional, but some of the most, I think, brilliant ideas comes when you're not at work and you're not thinking about work, and for whatever reason it comes to your mind. So I'm kind of like your master blender. I'm more inspired when I'm at home and thinking of having a drink or something relaxing. And I think that's pretty normal.
Okay, thank you.
It's been a very interesting session so far. I think a lot of people learn more about Davidoff as well as bourbon. So I guess I want to see what people think about the pairing between bourbon and or between Eagle Rare and the Davidoff Robusto Intenso. If anybody who's really discovered something new today, who are not really normally bourbon fans, and what's your thoughts on the Eagle Rare bourbon? Feel free to jump in as you may.
I learned something.
Well, that's a start. I think we all did.
No, I appreciated Sam's slide on the different tastes and smells that you can obtain in a cigar, because as he was going through it, I was looking at, when we look at our bourbons, like on the nose on Eagle Rare, you get like a toffee note, you get orange peel, you get dark fruits, cherry note, maybe even a touch of chocolate. So it was starting to coincide with what he was talking about with his cigar, and I can truly appreciate how it accents the cigar and vice versa. And then on the taste, you get like a brown sugar molasses type note. It's kind of oily, touch of raisin, brown sugar, a little bit of cocoa. And so then the finish, you get that spiciness, that old leather toffee note come through, and it's really dry and lingering. So when you pair it with a cigar, I never really appreciated the fact that a lot of those characteristics are part and parcel of a cigar too, and how it accents it. And I think that spiciness of the rye bourbon like this actually can cut through that and accentuate it. And that spiciness, that pepperiness, gives that contrast when you're smoking the cigar. I would think that you can appreciate that. So I think I learned that today, is that I didn't realize that you can really accentuate and for a cigar and bourbon together, because I really don't smoke cigars, unfortunately. But I've done the same thing with chocolates, and I really started to appreciate the pairing with chocolate too. So now I've got another appreciation of pairing it with cigars.
So now you have to try cigars, Drew.
Yeah. I don't want to ruin my palate, though. That's the problem. I don't know if that would affect it, but
no, not at all.
Well, I don't know. I try to stay away from like salt and different spices because it really degrades my palate. So it's very important I taste properly. I guess it's only temporary anyways, right?
Yeah. If you Richard Patterson from Delmar.
Yeah, Richard. Yeah.
So he's a cigar smoker, and it hasn't affected him over the 50 years he's been doing it.
No, I would say he's pretty successful, right?
Yeah.
Roy, if I could chip in there.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Just to encourage Drew to try cigars. I met a couple of winemakers, Olivia Lefleur and Frank Drux, who smoke like chimneys, but they have the most superb palates. They make fantastic white Burgundy. When I first had Eagle Rare, I found it a little bit bitter, but I've actually grown to love it, and I shall get another bottle. And just tell us a bit about your what you taste, and do you taste other people's bourbons, and what you're looking for, and how you sort of develop your palate and your ideas.
Yeah, well, I do taste other bourbons because we do competitive cross sections, because if you just put your head in the sand, your competitors can leave you in far behind. So what I look for is the balance. I don't like anything that's over dominant. So I think with Eagle Rare, what you see is that bitterness or that dryness, that astringency is from the oak. And when you age something in Kentucky in a new barrel for 10 years, you're going to get some of that. But you do gain appreciation over time for that. But that's more dominant in the wood characteristics. So if you were to take our Buffalo Trace I think you'll find it more palatable because that bitterness or that astringency and oak flavor is more relaxed. So the balance is more. So a brand like Buffalo Trace is more balanced, is I would like to describe it. So it's got more of the transition across the palate from the fruitiness to the dryness and the oak. It's more balanced, whereas oak is predominant on Eagle Rare because of the extra 2 ages that it ages. So I think people will learn to appreciate both for different reasons. So,
I mean, after Jack and Jim, I think Buffalo Trace was the first sort of proper bourbon I have, and I really loved it. And I bought, numerous bottles of it, and it's sort of a go-to whiskey for me. I mean, it's just a great everyday whiskey. I really love it.
Appreciate it.
I think people like yourself, you're kind of born with a good palate. So when did you first discover that you had a above average palate for tasting?
So it goes back to my mother, who has an exceptional palate. It runs in the family. She says I took after her. But really, until you start focusing on it, you really don't think about it. So back when I started at Seagram, I started tasting, and that's when it really came to me. I could actually discern differences between things, and but it's been ever since you were young. But I find that you have to maintain it now, and as you get older, you start diminishing. Your taste starts diminishing, so it's a challenge to maintain what you have. And that's like I said, I try to eat now foods without salt, reduce that, because that desensitizes you. So you want to maintain your palate, you got to work at it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. And for you, Sam?
Yeah, well, for me, it was born in a family where we had always like a taste for good food, for great wines, and I basically, I just admire, or I appreciate so much if you taste different tastes on your palate, right? And basically, I know that it's easier to find out aromas in the liquid than in a cigar, and that's why I always encourage the cigar aficionados, look what is in the cigar. Why does a cigar taste more woody or more peppery or more caramel versus another cigar? And for me, it's basically what we do is always we smoke 100% to the mono blends of each variety, and then you get the idea of, okay, San Vicente tastes like this, an Olor like this, Piloto like this. So you get this memory in your head, and I think it's also a gift to memorize the tastes, which is not easy. But I think through training, like Drew said, with paying attention to your palate and really conserve it well, is helping a lot. I mean, it's basically also with the wine, after a certain time, a Cabernet Sauvignon is tasting a little bit stronger versus, for example, a Merlot or Pinot Noir, So you get familiar with the different tobaccos that we have, and this is helping a lot by creating blends. And really, I think when you enjoy a cigar, when you really concentrate on a cigar, it's always important you have the right setting, you have the right focus on the cigar, and really try to always keep this the same, to have professional tastings.
I had a conversation with Reinhard this afternoon, who I think is still on the call. Yeah, about the sensory experience of it. So Reinhard, if I can maybe invite you into the conversation for a little bit, and get your thoughts on the impact of sensory in a tasting environment.
Sure, my pleasure.
There he is.
Hello, Reini.
Good to see you, gentlemen. Thank you for the wonderful call. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for the introduction.
Well, Roy, as we discussed earlier today, I always tend to think of experiences as a more holistic overall thing than just what immediately comes to the eye, or in particular to the nose and the mouth, right? I mean, fine cigars, a wonderful glass of bourbon, all that speaks to all of our senses. And the more immersive we can design and create the experience, the more memorable, meaningful, and mesmerizing it will ultimately be for all the people. And like for me, for example, I always say I'm a synesthete, so my perception works a little differently, because I can almost smell colors, or I can see certain sounds, if you will. And so whenever I smoke a cigar or have a fine glass of Eagle Rare, and there's many different layers of that experience that are way beyond just the actual smell and the taste perception on the palate. And I would love to invite everybody to become more in tune with the senses yet again, because these are our instruments that we're all gifted from baby days on. And because of what's going on in the world, we've become very good at tuning out and not actively focusing on our senses anymore, because we're simply overwhelmed. And very few people like yourself, Drew, or you, Sam, like professionally, we sort of have to be very much in tune with our senses. But for a lot of other people, that's not the case anymore. So I want to invite people to actively listen again and closely watch things and see things and smell and taste actively. And then the world just becomes a treasure box of wonderful experiences. And we can all enhance our experiences, even with something as humble as a simple cigar, right? I mean, that wonderful product can deliver an experience on so many different levels. And if we can focus on that and make that happen, then, as I said, the sky's the limit, right? In terms of perception and having those experiences. So I think it's almost reverse engineering the process of perception and actively creating experiences for ourselves. And that goes beyond just the actual product, but it's all the surrounding aspects and factors. It's the visuals, it's the tactile sensations and the patterns, it's the sounds that we have with our drink or with our cigar, and that can be an absolutely inspiring and enhancing aspect. So I always want to invite people to really go on a journey of discovery for themselves and try to be excited and mesmerized by the experiences to be had.
I think you're spot on, Reinhard. I think a lot of people have certain moments in their life where they taste an exceptional drink or smoke an exceptional cigar, and a lot is to do with the environment around them. You know, that kind of adds to the experience, and that really enhances the flavor aspect of that cigar at that time. So yeah. It's all very interesting to hear you say that.
So it's just one aspect that I would like to add to that is, and we briefly spoke about this today, Roy, is that I don't want this to sound like a fluffy marketing blah blah, right? Where somebody comes in and be like, this wonderful cigar, this glass of bourbon, it's all like pink unicorns and candy floss and stuff. It all has to be deeply grounded and fundamentally linked to the actual product. So for me, when I say reverse engineering, I mean I do a sensory evaluation and an analytical tasting of either the spirit or the cigar, and I take all the clues that the product is giving me and then reverse engineer it by applying certain sounds or visuals or a particular pattern to it, because that's how my brain works as well. But just so I think it's very important to always keep the wonderful product in mind and make that the core priority, because gentlemen like Drew and your entire team, Sam and Roy in the Dominican Republic, they give their blood and sweat and tears to produce that fabulous product, and I want to pay the utmost respect to that. I just want to every now and then add a different layer or sort of provide you with an experience that will transform something that you've probably known for decades, right?
Perfect. Drew, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, one thing we do when we train people here when they first come on board is we don't train them. We just say sit at the table that we have and taste. So they really got to focus, eliminate all the outside distractions and focus on what they're doing. So we don't even train them for the first 4 weeks. They just have to focus on tasting, and which is kind of what you're saying, Reinhard, is that you have to learn to taste, basically. I mean, that's the first step. So I totally agree with that concept. And the other point that I make is our lab is specially designed to eliminate outside influences. So we have it isolated within our group here. So it's not going to be a thoroughfare. We have special filtration, air filtration, so that you have the cleanest possible air. And so we try to set up for success and when we're tasting the sensory experience. So I totally agree with what Reinhard was saying. It's very important for us.
I guess it's the same for you, Sam. I know you and Reinhard had conversations about this before as well.
Yes, and it's very, yeah, exactly. It's so you have a lot of external impacts, I would say, on your taste, right? And I agree with Drew. It's fundamental that what I said before, that you have the same setting, or that you feel, let's say, in a perfect mood to taste, right? And so, for example, if we do tastings in Dominican Republic, we do smoke, I don't know, like 7 to 8 cigars a day. But if we have a blend that is really like a favorite, it's always in the next morning, without any coffee, any breakfast, that we taste the cigar again. You know, that your palate is fresh. You taste it, you get more the flavors, you know, and more the aromas out of it. And then I agree, we had this with Reini together, like a color. If you see a red color, you get more these matured flavors, more this smoothiness, right? Whereas you have, like, for example, blue color, you get more this freshness out of it. And these are factors that is influencing your taste. The same then depending on how you feel every day, right? A cigar can taste different depending on the mood you're in. And I think this is the beauty of it, you know, to concentrate on the flavors, taking some notes, you know, and just try to also have an evolution of your taste, you know, concentrate more and be more focused what we actually enjoy, be it a nice bourbon, be it a nice whiskey or a nice cigar. And this is something, and I believe we are in both industries, you know, it's all about taste. It's like this bon vivant, it's this nice lifestyle, and we enjoy good food, good drinks, good cigars. And it's just great to pay attention to it, you know, I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you, Reinhard, for your input in this subject. I highly appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
I think, Antonios, you had a question for both Sam and Drew. If you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, hello. Actually, I just want to make a question to both Sam and Drew. Actually, I'm very glad to be in this conversation. A lot of info coming up, so basically is
You're on mute, Antonios.
Yeah, Antonios.
There we are.
Sorry for that, guys. Yep.
No worries.
So actually a lot of info coming up, both for bourbon and cigars. And my question was actually, what is your opinion on training someone's palate? Generally speaking, not only for cigars or not only for wines, not only for bourbon. Generally, what is your advice to train someone's palate?
Drew, if you want to go first.
Sure. Well, I can speak to what we do is it takes many months and various testing protocols that we have. And then the hardest part is the calibration of describing a product. So if you think something is fruity, like what does that mean? So to calibrate with panelists and people tasting is very difficult. It's probably the hardest thing to do because, you know, everybody's perception of tastes and flavors are a little bit different based on your experiences. So the calibration piece is difficult. So we have some methods for that. And then the other thing is we're trying to get more science in terms of the chemical structures of some of these flavors, so we can train people on certain flavors. So it's taking a lot of effort. We have some specialized equipment to do that, but it's very, very challenging and difficult. So the training aspect is extremely important, not just from consistency, but for someone to replace me, as I need people to be able to do what I do, especially as I travel around the world talking about our products. We need to perform just like I was here. So we have to train palates basically here so that I can do stuff like that. So that's a really big challenge for me professionally. And I think we're making a lot of progress.
Yeah, and I mean, Antonio, too, I just feel like you have to listen to your senses, right? Try to, and what I always encourage people is like to try to remember those tastes, right? So if you go a little bit out of the box and you try, I don't know, a new food or new whatever product, try to memorize it. What was the taste of it, and then pay attention to it. I think sometimes we don't pay enough attention to these taste profiles, or we don't listen to our senses, right? So, for example, we at Davidoff, we don't have a special tool in place, but we do have tasting sheets where we note down different flavors. And as Drew said, I mean, everybody is different, right? Everybody has different palates. So sometimes if somebody says it's fruity or the other one says it's wood, it can be different taste profiles. And yes, we at Davidoff, we give you certain taste profiles that we find out in a cigar, but if you taste something else, there's no problem, it's your senses. And and I think it can also start something with like with cooking, when you taste each ingredient, you know exactly what will be the end result if you combine those ingredients, if you pay attention to it. And this would be my advice, and just focus on your senses and try to memorize them. Yeah.
Hope that answers your question, Antonius.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Useful.
Tom, you had a question as well.
Hi, Sam. How often do you smoke the mono blends to kind of keep your flavor memory sharp?
So basically, what I do is always when we have a new variety or new hybrid, we normally taste 100%. I should do it more often because normally I go twice a year to Honduras and to Dominican Republic, where we do this often. I just had recently the experience with Reinhard, where we were tasting different mono blends, and it's just so interesting because if you have the pure taste of a tobacco variety, you can basically, it gives you an idea how you combine each tobacco to get this end result, right? And this mono blends is helping a lot. It gives you like this purity of taste, and basically when you then enjoy a cigar, you can filter out, okay, this taste, for example, more acidity comes from a San Vicente, for example, tobacco leaf, and this is also a good way of training your palate when you create new blends. So we do this a lot. This is basically common for us to do it. Especially our master blends in the DR, and then always they then send me the samples of 100% mono blends, whereas I then also try them at home or in the office, and then basically we compare what are the senses, what are the flavors, what are the stimulations of each tobacco, and this is very, very much necessary to basically increase also your experience, your knowledge in terms of tobacco. And we have also, and we call this the tongue tasting. Where we could do once we can see each other again, where we have different mono blends already predefined of the main Dominican tobaccos. And this is something very interesting that you can also sense how each tobacco is different from each other, depending on the different seed, on the different soil where it's growing. And this is something, it's quite interesting, yes.
I think I quickly want to get Anthony into the call. Because Anthony did that session in Dominican Republic, so kind of see what his experience was for that. Anthony.
Yeah, that was really, really interesting for me. It was kind of I'd never tried mono blends in any way, so kind of understanding why mono blends don't necessarily work compared to the end result. So you're trying 100% binder leaf, 100% wrapper leaf, 100% filler leaf, and it tastes great, but it's missing those other factors that you're kind of looking for. So when you then put them all together at the end, it's individual notes of music then come together to make that symphony at the end. And that's how I've kind of wrapped my head around it. And now when I'm kind of sampling cigars, I'm thinking to myself, okay, why is this wrapper working? Why is this binder working? Why is this filler working? And then trying to pick those out and then trying them all together and thinking of them as a whole makes perfect sense to me. And that session really opened my eyes and opened my mind to understanding why you've got to this end point and all of those stages that sort of made their way to there. So that was, I think that was a hell of a day, Roy. That was one of the good ones.
Perfect, thank you. I think we're going to wrap it up now. I just want to thank Drew. Thank you very much for your time and for your insight on Eagle Rare Bourbon and Buffalo Trace. I think a lot of people learned a lot more about the product and your way of thinking and to a certain extent your way of life. Sam, the same. Always a delight to having you on the call and sharing your expertise. As usual, notice this session has been recorded, so you can find it back on the C.Gars YouTube channel probably in the next couple of days. So thank you all for joining this call. I don't know if anybody from C.Gars Ltd would like to say final words before we close it down.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Roy and Sam from Davidoff, and Drew and Ross from Buffalo Trace at Eagle Rare. Go to the websites. We've got another 4 virtual Herfs before the end of the year, so they're all listed online, and we look forward to seeing you all in a fortnight.
I'll just add my thanks to Sam as usual. Very educational session. Thanks, Drew. Nice to meet you. In fact, I think it was an exceptionally educational session, especially for me as a Scotch whiskey drinker, not a bourbon drinker. So I learned plenty. And thanks to everybody for joining us. And of course, my thanks as always to Roy in the studio.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Have a great night, everyone.
Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Bye, boys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.